Starting off this countdown, we have Auroville, otherwise known as the City of Dawn. Auroville was meant to be a town where men and women from all over the world could come to live in peace and harmony. It was supposed to promote human unity. This town had no money, government, religion, you name it. So it seems like a dream place to live, right? No fighting, not having to worry about money. Well, after a while, the town had problems with theft and harassment. People were taking advantage of other people, some were even murdering others. Cause hey, no laws means killing is legal, right? Not really. So yeah, let's just say it didn't go according to plan. Looks like humans are incapable of living in peace. In our 9th spot, we have Ordos, China. Ordos was once a very popular city with a population of 100,000 people. But nowadays, the city is a complete ghost town. So basically, in the early 2000s, the Chinese government invested billions of dollars to construct this community. But since it took so much to build the city, that meant that the property values were very high. So not a lot of people wanted to move in. This is one of the things that contributed to its downfall. In fact, this is said to be the most famous ghost city in China and the world's largest ghost town. The city was built for 300,000 people, but only 70,000 ended up moving to live there. Then, after running out of funding, construction of the city just stopped. So nowadays, there's just tons of unfinished and empty apartments and no one no longer lives there. In our 8th spot, we have Freetown, Christiania. Located in its own neighborhood in Copenhagen, this town was founded in 1971 by Jacob Ludvigsen. Jacob was a strong believer of the free love movement, so he wanted to build a society from scratch that would focus on free love and that would help with the psychological and physical health of its residents. But soon after, drugs became a huge problem in the town. People were selling and buying hardcore drugs there. Then, as drug use increased, the amount of crime increased too. Surprisingly, the town is still around today though. It thrives off of tourism and by hosting local events. Coming in at number 7, we have Benito, Brazil. In 1929, this town was founded after a group of Finnish settlers moved from Finland to Brazil. With the help of a pastor, they created this town. Apparently, the pastor was convinced that God wanted him to start a Finnish utopia in the tropics. Kind of specific, but okay. So that's what they did. But they also had a strict set of rules. People that lived there couldn't drink, they couldn't smoke, they had to be vegan, plus they had to work every day but didn't receive pay. Surprisingly, this town ran until 1942. Then people were like, okay, we can't run a town without money. So they decided to let tourists come into the town. But as soon as tourism took over, the town began to fall apart. In our 6th spot, we have Arco Santi. Arco Santi is an experimental town built in 1970 in the desert close to Phoenix. It was built by a man named Paolo Soliri, an architect. This town was created to see if it was possible for humans to live in harmony with the environment and, not kill it like we currently are. So for example, the buildings were solar powered for heating and cooling and electricity. Paolo's goal for this community was also to teach people how to build houses like these so that they could live a more eco-friendly life. But after his passing, Paolo's daughter came forward saying that he was a very bad man. When she was younger, he would take advantage of her and do really sick things to her. When word got out, people were disgusted and some even left the town. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Findhorn Eco Community. This is a community that was founded on the principles of sustainability and renewable energy. Located in Scotland, the concept for this community was come up with in the 1960s, but it wasn't until 1982 that they had it all in motion. To this day, this community is known to have the smallest environmental footprint of any town in the modern world. For example, some houses were literally built from recycled materials like whiskey barrels, and they use algae, snails, and plants to purify their drinking supply. Seems pretty great, right? Well yeah, until just recently when a resident was fed up and set a fire in the community. The fire ended up causing 400,000 pounds of damage to the area. So let's just say that was a pretty big scandal for them. Oh. Moving on to number 4, we have the Federation of Damanhur. The Federation of Damanhur is a utopian commune located in Italy. It was created in the 70s by a man named Oberto and some of his followers. It started off small, but now there are at least 800 people living there, which is a pretty impressive number. The community considered themselves the collective dream. They focused on artistic expression and optimism and meditation. But apparently it's a very culty place to live. live. If you want to join the community, you need to give up your name and be assigned another one. You also need to give up your identity and find a new personality. You need to abandon your family and not have contact with them, and you need to have total obedience to the community's leaders. Plus, you're not allowed to stand up to the leaders or criticize them. Doesn't seem like a great place to live after all, does it? In our third spot, we have the farm. The farm commune in Tennessee was formed during the hippie movement when people were like, nah, screw this, let's just make our own community. It was formed by Stephen Gaskin, a creative writing teacher from San Francisco. He's known for gathering a bunch of people and leading them to the farm. It's a 1,000-acre piece of land from a former cattle ranch. Before he knew it, he had over 1,000 people living there. But in order to get in, you have to take a vow of poverty, and you had to promise not to smoke, drink, or consume any animal products. On top of that, they live pretty environmentally friendly, getting their power through solar panels and such. But soon, the community turned pretty culty. It then faced a number of problems that drove out some members, like they were bad with money management, and the leaders had a bad ego, and some say it felt like living in a bubble. Moving on to number 2, we have the Oneida Colony. This community started in 1842 in New York by John Humphrey. He was a practitioner of perfectionism, which basically surrounds the concept that Jesus had already returned, and it was up to us to create a paradise on earth. So the community started as a small group of 80 people, but quickly it doubled in size. By 1880, there were 350 people living there. All members would live in a huge mansion and would work together. Now here's all the controversial aspects of this community. For starters, members were regularly brought in front of judges who would list all their flaws, and then they were expected to fix them. Then you have the fact that you weren't allowed to be in a single relationship while being there. Instead, all members were married to each other, and they would often just swap partners. Now why was this a thing? Well, John the leader wanted his members to breed to create a super race. In the end, John was arrested for taking advantage of some of the members, and without him leading the community, it fell apart. And in our number 1 spot today, we have Pullman, Illinois. This was a town created by George Pullman. In 1880, he purchased thousands of acres of land and was like, let's build a community for workers. So he built a miniature town and built a factory in the town. He thought this would entice the workers, like, hey, work for me and you have a nice town that you can live in. And for the first few years, this town was very successful, and it won a bunch of awards for being the best place to live. But eventually, the sinister intentions of George were revealed. This dude banned a lot of things in this town, and he was like a dictator. On a regular, he had people inspect the workers' homes to make sure they were clean and undamaged. In 1894, he lowered the workers' wages, and they got violent. They started a huge strike that had to be broke up by the American military. After that, the government banned this town. They're like, it's very un-American. Literally, that's a quote from them. Alright guys, that's all for today's video. If you had to live in any of these communities, which one would you pick? Let me know in the comments below. And now, speaking of comments, let's move on to our comment shoutout portion. I'll be shouting out comments from the video, top 10 mysterious photos recovered from the depths of the ocean. One more relapse commented, love these top 10 videos, I could watch them all day. So you know what, why don't you? And while you're at it, go check out my personal channel, Peach. Go check it out and subscribe right now. Ray Ray commented, my question is belly button lint and its significant importance in hygiene. Doesn't it just form because people don't clean their belly button? I don't think you're supposed to, like, it's literally from cotton in your shirt getting in your belly button, and then it builds up over time because people don't clean it. Anyway, don't know why that was commented on the video. Didn't mention anything about belly buttons or belly button lint, but okay there. And Lord Ward 2 commented, is that the pirate ship from SpongeBob? You mean the Flying Dutchman? I don't know. I mean, I do know, it's definitely not, but was it the Flying Dutchman you're referring to, or was there another pirate ship in SpongeBob? Alright guys, that's all the comments I'm shouting out for today's video. Make sure to comment something down below for a chance to be featured in my next comment shoutout. And as always, don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to Most Amazing Top 10 for more amazing videos. I've been your host, Lindsay Ivan, and I'll show you when I show ya. Starting off this countdown, we have the Octagon City. This city was created in 1856 and was meant to be a place only for vegetarians to live in Texas. It got its name Octagon City due to the fact that their homes were shaped as octagons. The designer of the city believed that this was a more practical design for homes as it let in more light. Plus, he wanted the town square to also be an octagon shape. From there, the city was going to be made up of 4 octagon villages, farmhouses, and other public buildings. But it turned out to be nothing like the residents expected. About 60 families came from all over the country to live there, and they were all disappointed. Their homes were 16 by 16 windowless log cabins. Yeah, definitely not what they expected. Not only that, but they faced a number of other problems, like lack of water, bad mosquitoes, and disease. This all contributed to the downfall of the city. But there are still a few octagon houses that remain there if you want to visit them today. Little fun fact. Moving on to number 9, we have Cloud 9. AKA the floating city. Yes, you heard me correctly, a floating city. During the mid-20th century, inventor Buckminster Fuller said that he was going to fix the overcrowding situation in Tokyo by creating a city in the sky. How was he gonna do this? Well, he was going to make a bunch of giant geodesic spheres and fill them with air. He planned on then heating the air with solar power or human activity, and then said that the sphere would just float. Now you might be like, well, won't they fly away? Don't worry, he thought this through. He would then anchor the sphere to mountains or other structures to keep them from flying around. Obviously, for many reasons, this was a complete fail and the city was never built. In our 8th spot, we have the Death Star. Any fans of Star Wars here? Well, did you know that in the late 16th century, the Venetian Republic created a brand new city that was basically like the Death Star in Star Wars? It was known as Palmanova. It was meant to be a utopia for its residents, but also a military force. It had high walls, a moat, and other defenses to keep enemies out. The only problem is that people refused to live there. They thought it would entice the Ottomans to try and attack them. Like, by creating something to keep people out, we'll just make them want to try and get in. So Palmanova was a flop. Nowadays, it's a popular tourist attraction though. Moving on to number 7, we have Fordlandia, Brazil. In 1927, Henry Ford thought it would be a good idea to create a massive rubber plantation in the jungles of Brazil. He named it Fordlandia. He designed the towns to have swimming pools, a golf course, and bungalows. So it sounds pretty nice, right? A utopian community in the middle of the Brazilian jungle. Well, think again. Ford's plan was to get a lot of rubber from the trees of the Amazons for car tires and such. He was in the middle of a rubber shortage, so he thought he would outsource Brazil. But unfortunately, his whole plan failed. The trees ended up getting a bad leaf fungus and died. Then his team and him got into multiple disputes with the Brazilian laborers. And then they started a number of riots. It was a pretty big fall, so he shut it down in 1945 and sold the land to the Brazilian government. All that remains there are a couple of structures overgrown by nature. Moving on to number 6, we have the Drop City. Drop City was founded in 1965 by a bunch of students who joined forces to buy a plot of land in Colorado. They wanted to create a utopian commune for artists or creative people. It was named Drop City because the idea was you drop out of your current city and join this one. So they marked the community as a place where creative people could share meals and ideas, where everybody had a say and nobody ran the show. Turns out that a lot of people were here for this. In fact, they had a huge influx of people into their community that they actually started suffering from overcrowding. Then they suffered from personality conflicts, and by 1968 the city was abandoned. The structures have since been dismantled, but there are still some ruins left there. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Magnitogorsk. Created under the rule of Stalin, this town was supposed to be an industrial powerhouse and a worker's paradise. Everyone was going to live in a large community with apartment blocks and endless sunlight. Children would have places to play, and residents would compete against each other to improve this city. But that never happened. When volunteers first arrived to build the city, there was absolutely nothing there, so they had to sleep in tents in the freezing cold winter temperatures. During the first winter, tons of workers died. In fact, they would have carts sent out around the camp each morning to collect all the bodies. Then in the summer, they faced terrible dust storms that buried workers alive. In less than a year, so many workers passed away that all the volunteers were like, F this, and then they fled. To make matters worse, when the workers left, thousands of prisoners were sent to take their place, and it turned into a giant slave labor camp. In our fourth spot, we have Pruitt-Igoe. In 1949, architect Minoru Yamasaki was going to create a community that would change US housing forever. He created 17 apartment buildings that were 11 stories high on the edge of St. Louis and called it Pruitt-Igoe. It was said to be a paradise for middle-class individuals. The grand opening of this town was broadcast in 1954 on live TV. That same year, though, the Supreme Court declared segregation in schools was unconstitutional. Well, all the residents in this town were white, and then they were scared that people of color were going to be allowed to live with them, so they left. And that is extremely messed up. As a result, Pruitt-Igoe became completely abandoned. At one point, raw sewage was flowing down the hallways of the apartment buildings. That's how neglected it became. But it was the perfect place for drug gangs to set up shop and for poor individuals to live. And that's what they did. Soon it became a very dangerous housing project. By 1972, the buildings were demolished. Moving on to number 3, we have the nudist colony. If you're an open and free individual who hates wearing clothes, then this community would have been perfect for you. Founded in 1895 in Washington State, this community was supposed to be a place where people could do whatever they wanted. In the end, they accidentally created a nudist colony. People were like, screw clothes and government rules, let's just walk around naked. But not everyone was keen on this. As a result, it started a war between the nudes and the prudes, as they called it. These groups would fight constantly. Eventually, it was so bad that it led to the fall of the community after about a decade. In our second spot, we have Booze Town. Imagine living in a town where you can drink all the time and be surrounded by alcohol 24/7. Well, that was the idea for this next town, Booze Town. In 1952, Mel Johnson created the idea, a city built on booze. Every street would have alcohol stores, and the town would run on their own currency called booze bucks. On top of that, bars, clubs, and liquor stores would be open 24/7. They would never close. For obvious reasons, no children were allowed inside, but they did offer daycare services located just outside the city. They even said that they would have their own police system, but the police weren't like regular cops. No, they were called the party police, and instead of fining drunk people, they would act as caregivers and give drunk people aspirin and then help them home. Obviously, this is a terrible idea, and it was dropped by 1960. And in our number 1 spot today, we have Fruitlands. Founded in 1843 in Harvard, Massachusetts, Fruitlands was meant to be a utopian community for vegans. But the community was very, very strict. They were only allowed to drink water, nothing else. And no animals were ever to be used in farming. The most ridiculous thing of all was that they weren't allowed to even plant or grow root vegetables because it was said to disturb the worms. In the end, by the winter of that year, the community was completely out of food, forcing their residents to leave. Nowadays, the original farmhouse is still there if you want to visit. It's just been turned into a museum. Alright guys, that's all for today's video. Let me know in the comments below if you had to live in one of these towns, which one would you choose to live in? Let me know, I'm actually curious. And now, speaking of comments, let's move on to our comment shoutout portion. I'll be shouting out comments from the video, top 10 horrifying things recovered from China. Shura Pasang commented, shoutout, please. Well, just because you said please, here is your shoutout. Hope you're having an amazing day. Thanks for watching the video. Hope you smashed that like button. Richard Sutherland commented, wonderful video. Did not know Chinese historical data was so interesting. Honestly, their history is very interesting. I love doing any kind of historical videos. And Edgar Garcia commented, so what about the werewolf? I have no clue what you're talking about. You're talking about Jacob from Twilight? Or like, is there like an urban legend about like werewolves? Or like, does China have werewolves? I don't know. You gotta let me know. Alright guys, that's all the comments I'm shouting out for today's video. Make sure to comment something down below for a chance to be featured in my next comment shoutout. And as always, don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to Most Amazing Top 10 for more amazing videos. I've been your host, Lindsay Ivan, and I'll see ya. Starting off in our
number 10 spot, we have the Tsar Bomb. This is a photo that was taken on October 30th, 1961. It was quite the Halloween spooky fright that year, as this is said to be the largest and most powerful nuclear weapon ever created and tested. The hydrogen aerial bomb was developed in the Soviet Union by a group of nuclear physicists that were under the leadership of Igor Kurchatov. The bomb was dropped by parachute and was detonated autonomously. While this test was meant to be a secret, it turned out to be less than well kept, as it was obviously a huge explosion that was detected by United States intelligence agencies. A secret US recon aircraft called Speedlight Alpha was there monitoring the explosion, and it got so close that it had its anti-radiation paint absolutely scorched off. The photo clearly shows the bomb as it exploded, and it is said that this bomb was 5,000 times stronger than the ones that were dropped on Japan during World War II. That's not to say that those ones weren't strong, because they were absolutely devastating. It's just an example to show how large this one really was. In our number 9 spot today, we have the radio telescope. This is a photo of what was once a secret, but is now considered a huge celebratory work. This photo was taken during the construction of China's 500-meter aperture spherical radio telescope. This huge dish was constructed in a natural depression in the landscape and is the world's largest filled aperture radio telescope. The design is absolutely novel, which is why, while the telescope was first proposed in 1994, construction didn't start until 2011. It first observed light in 2016, and after years of testing, it was declared fully operational in January of 2020. If you're interested in space, you'll know exactly why this is such a fascinating and exciting creation. This radio telescope can give us beautifully sensitive observations that could help in the hunt for gravitational waves and give us more information of the mysterious and fleeting blasts of radiation that are known as fast radio bursts. Every step in the world of space exploration could have some wild implications on our world, and it's all very cool. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Pentagon crash. We have all heard about the devastating September 11th, 2001 attacks, but some of you might not know that on that day, there were actually a few separate coordinated attacks, all a part of the same plan, and one of those attacks was on the Pentagon. This photo was previously classified but eventually was released by the US government, and it shows the absolute devastation that was done by the commercial plane that crashed into the Pentagon building. The plane was able to tear through all 5 rings that existed in the building. All of the people on board the plane that day, as well as 125 people that were in the building at the time, passed away in this horrible event. For obvious reasons, the initial photos of the Pentagon damage were withheld from the public or from circulating in the media, but now that they have been released, it just shows us all another side to that horrible, terrifying day. In our number 7 spot today, we have Operation High Jump. This photo was taken in the late 1940s during Operation High Jump. This was a United States Navy operation that was aimed to establish the Antarctic research base Little America 4. It is said that the goals of this mission were to train personnel and test equipment in frigid conditions, determine the feasibility of establishing and utilizing bases in the Antarctic, as well as scoping out possible base sites, examining and amplifying the existing stores of knowledge of several different kinds of conditions in the area, such as geological, geographical, and meteorological, and this final one, which was initially denied, but apparently also to consolidate and extend the United States sovereignty over the largest practical area of the Antarctic continent. This final one was publicly denied for quite some time. This photo shows one of the ships belonging to the United States Navy stuck between 2 of the Arctic's icebergs. In our number 6 spot today, we have a UFO report. This photo is of a previously classified document from 1963. Although the document still has a lot of information that has been blacked out, the document is the description and report of an unidentified flying object or UFO encounter. This is said to have taken place over the desert of Nevada, and the report was written in detail in order to have a written record of this event. The document is said to be the authentic report from the FBI, which is exactly why some of the details have been omitted. This might seem like less of a big deal now, as in this day and age we have declassified video footage of similar kinds of encounters, but for 1963 this was huge, as discussions of alien or extraterrestrial life is a big part of our modern society. This document shows that these things have been on our minds for many, many years now. In our number 5 spot today, we have a flying saucer. Speaking of aliens and UFOs, one place on Earth that has a multitude of alien stories coming from it is of course none other than Area 51. This site is no stranger to conspiracy theories, and this declassified photo taken at the location might give us a little insight into how these theories began. This photo clearly shows a strange disc-like object next to some more regular looking planes, and I mean, to be fair, if we saw that disc flying through the air, it does resemble the flying saucer type UFO that used to be talked about in the mainstream as the preferred alien mode of transportation. As it turns out, this photo is actually of an experimental aircraft that was made by the United States Air Force, of course, which is why the letters USAF can be seen on the craft. This was one of the few aircrafts created for the purpose of trying out various air carriers. Similar ones to this were also created by the government and were actually seen flying over the southwest region of the United States, which surely only contributed to the UFO discussions. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Soviet spacecraft. This photo shows the construction of the Soviet Buran spacecraft. Apparently, this was the spacecraft that was built in response to the news spilled by Richard Nixon in 1972 that the United States was to build its own brand new spacecraft, which was to be designed by NASA. The Buran was the first space plane to be produced as part of the Soviet-Russian Buran program, and in 1988 it actually went on to complete an unmanned spaceflight that was extremely successful. Unfortunately, this craft met its demise in 2002 when the storage hangar it was located in collapsed. The Buran program was suspended prior to this collapse because of a lack of funds and the political situation in the Soviet Union. The collapse was because of structural failure that was caused by poor maintenance, and unfortunately the spacecraft wasn't the only casualty. In far worse news, 8 workers also lost their lives that day. In our number 3 spot today, we have Area 51 Part 2. This is another photo that was taken from Area 51, and it shows another kind of spacecraft that is likely the source of many UFO stories. At this point, Area 51 will likely always be a place that is filled with rumors of our wildest imaginations, even if they were to one day start offering tours of the facility. Rumors span from aliens to mermaids and so much more, and it is believed that the US government is intentionally keeping it all a secret from us. Since the infamous Roswell incident that happened in 1947, the Nevada Air Force Base is going to be the source of many a mystery. While I don't know the exact details of what is going on in this photo, this is just another small insight into what goes on within the mysterious walls of Area 51. In our number 2 spot today, we have this nuclear waste facility. For another Nevada mystery, high up in the mountains of Yucca, there is a super top secret location that has details which are not to be released to the public. I guess that was probably implied when I said the word secret. The reason this facility is so secret is because it is said to hold all of America's nuclear waste. This waste repository was designated by the Nuclear Policy Act amendments of 1987, and basically it is a deep geological repository storage facility. While the project was approved in 2002 by the 107th United States Congress, as of April 14, 2011, federal funding for the site came to an end. This site was the focus of many fights as there were tons of people who were extremely opposed to it. The closure of the site has left the United States government and American nuclear power plants without any designated long-term storage facility. This photo is said to have come from the site of the nuclear waste storage facility. In our number 1 spot today, we have the experiment. This photo is an example of how, for a long time, the United States has done its best to stay on top of all of the latest kinds of technology and the most cutting-edge equipment. This photo is showing some kind of test that was being done on a prototype ejection seat. While this was once a classified photo, of course back when this was new technology, the Central Intelligence Agency has since released the photos in order to provide information on the technology that was being created during what now seems like the olden days of science. These times truly are not far off at all, and it's incredible to see how far we've come in so little time. This photo serves as a super cool reminder of just how technologically advanced we really are, although sometimes we may take that for granted.